dyslexia is difficulty with words. That's difficulty with reading words, difficulty with spelling words, or difficulty with communicating words.
Hello, this is Rita, and this is me and my mommy's podcast, and then my mommy, and there's me, and I'm just talking about this stuff, and then me tap this, because this is a tap this, it's a autism podcast, and there's a bunch of animals, and I'll be trying to in my hair, and there's a bunch of sand in the ocean. Also, there's also that stuff, and a woman makes it a little bit. Oh, that color is also old, yes, negative life. Dolphin has their feet. Oh, those they're my food. The boots are amazing. Also, this trying not to have a pen bag. Also, there's a podcast about autism and tap dancing and blah blah blah. I did ADHD in this thing. Also, this cute adorable pup. I'm Lita, that's my mommy. This is a human being who's singing. I can't really. Is someone lives on the screen. And this is needed step styles. And if anybody says anything bad about my mother in any shape or form, I will come for your careers. I do not care if I'm 13. I will come for your careers.
You can calm down. She's a little
Okay.
overprotective of her mother.
You want to be protective of yourself.
Jess, thanks so much for joining us on this Friends Friday for Lita's Tap Styles. Do you mind introducing yourself to our audience? Because I've tried introducing people and I sound like a robot.
Okay, sure. Hi, I'm Jess Arce, and I am the owner of 3D Learning Experts Tutoring. And I myself am dyslexic, as well as my husband and 3 of my 4 children. All 4 of my children have varying neurodiversities, with a total of 9. So very familiar with the world of neurodiversity, and I'm excited to be here today.
One of the reasons I was so excited about having you on as a guest, and the 13-year-old's just like, this is life. I've tried to explain to people what dyslexia is. It's not my wheelhouse, though. My PhD is in a totally different thing. Lita's one of the reasons we started Autistic Wings was people don't understand the entirety of neurodiversity. It wasn't just her autism. She's severely dyslexic, still struggling to figure out how to read. And we had dance teachers go, oh, I thought it just meant that the letters just kind of float a little bit on page. Would you mind explaining a little better that that is not all dyslexia is?
I would love to explain, and actually that's not at all what dyslexia is. So before I explain what dyslexia is, I think I want to explain what the moving on the pages is. That is called Irlen syndrome or scotopic syndrome. And so people who have Irlen syndrome or scotopic syndrome, same thing, just 2 different names. Dr. Irlen discovered it, and it is where things move on the page or they'll see double. I've had a student who read better upside down than right side up, and the grandma who was my client told me one of her sons had the same superpower. And so a lot of times people with dyslexia will also have Irlen or scotopic syndrome. And they're pretty easy remedies for those challenges. Colored overlays are often a great way to just solve the problem. We've had students who have gotten colored glasses so that it helps them to see things better. And if you go onto the Irlen.com website, you can take a test and it'll tell you or your child what their ideal preferred color is. Most people, it's blue. For tutoring, we use blue background for all of the reading that the kids need to do, because someone who has scotopic syndrome it'll be harder on the eyes for them to look at black print with white background. So just changing it up to cream can really make it a lot easier on the eye. So now let me talk about what dyslexia is. Dyslexia is difficulty with words. That's difficulty with reading words, difficulty with spelling words, or difficulty with communicating words. Some people don't struggle with reading. However, they can still be dyslexic. Most people think you have to have reading problems to be dyslexic. You do not. Pretty much everyone with dyslexia struggles with spelling. I have not met anyone with dyslexia who doesn't struggle with spelling, but not everyone struggles with the communication part of it, and not everyone struggles with the reading part of it. Though sometimes people will say it's also difficulty with writing. However, really the writing challenges roll over into our cousin dysgraphia. And dysgraphia is difficulty with writing. Graph means write. So that can be floppy handwriting, but more intensely, it can be someone can't take their thoughts from their brain to write it down on paper or to type it on the paper. They just can't get it out. They can verbalize it, but they can't. They get a block as soon as they're asked to put it in print. So, and then the third D that 3D Learning Experts covers is dyscalculia. Sorry. So dyscalculia, calculation, difficulty with math. And for people with dyscalculia, it's like a foreign language to them. They just don't understand the concepts of math. And there's varying times or degrees of challenges with that. It can be like simply addition. My very first student who had dyscalculia, or that I worked with for her dyscalculia, was 18 years old and she couldn't add 6 plus 4. She did not understand the concept of adding, 6 fingers to 4 more fingers gave you 10. And then very often they'll have difficulty with multiplication. And that is when my daughter struggled with multiplication, the teacher would say, oh, just practice the speed tests over and over again. That doesn't help someone with dyslexia or dyscalculia, either one. What we do is we teach short stories that they memorize, like the 6th grade class played musical chairs for 24 hours. And then they just have to, and they see the picture, and they just have to remember the 6th grade class and the chair is a 4, and they have to remember 24 hours. And now they know how to multiply and divide if they, take one away. So different ways of teaching is what's important for someone with dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. And so to, in response to the teachers that Lita's dealt with, she needs to be taught differently, right? For anything, we need to be taught differently than the traditional way of learning.
Well, and most of these have been dance teachers, and there's a lot of reading in dance class. There's a lot of writing in dance class, which
I go
seems
to dance, to learn how to dance. No one is paying them for me to learn how to read or anything else. I am paying them to teach me how to dance. They should lose their friggin' jobs. I mean, if you're not going to teach me what I'm paying you for, I'm not paying you anything more than half of a nickel.
she may have some opinions on it because,
Go to dance class for dance. It's called dance class because you learn dance. Also, you learn reading and writing in school. In school, dance class is after school. You go to dance class to learn dance. You don't go to dance class to do more school that you just got freaking done with. I'm
And
glad I don't go to public school.
why did they expect you to read and write for
so
The
it's
three jackasses?
not your opinion, 13-year-old. A lot of dance teachers feel themselves educators, even though they have no college background in education. And for like ballet, you cannot go up in the levels in ballet unless you take a written exam, which seems kind of like we could accommodate that fairly easy by just asking them to do a plie in front of you and not have to write down what a plie is. For her, it was like in tap class, they'll get flashcards out and you have to read the flashcards in front of everyone and then do the step. And it's like there could be some easy accommodations made for kids who are dyslexic, or a lot of times they want you writing and critiquing everyone in writing. Well, she has enough issues verbalizing what she's thinking sometimes on the spot like that. You ask her then to write and spell. I mean, even I at 43 am like picking up my phone and dictating it to figure out how to spell half the time. And it is a true fact. Googling the definition of a word to figure out how to spell it has saved my life a time or two. She's looking at me weird.
And this is why I have only half trust with grown-ups that aren't my parents. He's always tell me I can't use my phone to cheat, and then I see you all cheating, like, what the ever loving frick.
You can make accommodations fairly easily at times, but their statement is it's not what every dance teacher, even my friends who have never taught her, is if they can't take a written exam, can they actually do the dance? And I'm like, can we put a pin in that and have that discussion later?
Yeah, my daughter used to dance and she never had to take written.
It depends on how disciplined the studio is and how old fashioned they are. But she's had even newer teachers that they're like, no, you're going to do this in tap class. And it's like, I told you. A lot of the newer Gen Zers are really big on the journaling. And I'm like, we can have this discussion. And I've had a couple kids who are like, oh, I just didn't tell my parents this was being done in class. And I'm like, you need to go tell your parents so that they can be the bad parents. Because it's better for like us to come in and tell a teacher. I know I've had friends of mine who are like, you're a terrible parent. I'm like, no, I'm just telling you what you don't know, which you probably wanted to know anyways. Because like she has had teachers who are like, well, I just thought she was being lazy. So when you said she was dyslexic, I brought more reading into the dance studio.
Wow.
And they were
Where do
doing
you
it because
live?
we're in Colorado Springs right now, but we've had this my husband's military and we've had it happen in multiple states.
Really?
And I have friends who teach dance in all 50 states, and they're all like, oh, no, that would be something I would do because I'd want to help them. And if I'm making them read in the dance studio, then they're being helped. And I'm like,
Okay, at least I don't threaten a child to read by saying you're out of the combination, the dance, the probably maybe the studio, and also the whole freaking production you're gonna be in for the next 3 years.
but every teacher who did this to her felt that they were helping her by forcing her to read in the dance studio in front of people.
Wow.
And every single one was just like, well, I felt if she would just concentrate harder, maybe the letters wouldn't float on the page.
Hmm.
Dr. Google is not the best doctor.
I'm like seriously wondering right now why some people, as the people who actually realize I'm violent, I wonder why they ask why I'm violent even though I have a whole background of history that literally says make
calm down.
violent child.
She's definitely Gen Alpha. They have no filter on their mouths. But that was one of the reasons I did want to talk to you is a few teachers I've also blamed it on, well, she's homeschooled. And I'm like, no, we homeschooled her because she couldn't get the services she needed for dyslexia in the school system or in even the private schools. Because even the private schools we had her in, the teachers were like, well, if she just concentrates harder, she won't be dyslexic. And she was 5 when she got the dysgraphia and the dyscalculia diagnosis. And the teachers looked at me and were like, I don't know what dysgraphia and dyscalculia are. Are you just making up words now?
Oh, wow. Well, that's amazing that she got those diagnoses at 5. I mean, that's very unusual.
It was very unusual, and she got him an unusual way. Her ophthalmologist at 5 and then again at 6 was like, "I think she has these. We've got to go get her tested." And that's not usually where you get it from is your ophthalmologist.
That is true. Yeah. Um, but, typically most people don't get it from anywhere other than the parents having the feeling that something's different because schools tend to miss what dyslexia is. And they have such a huge misunderstanding that they usually aren't much help. And often the schools can get in trouble if they suggest that your child might have something as well. So they don't even want to go down that road.
I think you hit on a point there because a lot of parents just don't want that diagnosis, period.
Well, some parents don't want it because they're afraid of their kids ending up in special ed. I know I was one of those parents at first. I had heard horror stories about once your kid gets into special ed, they can never get out. Well, that is untrue. Your child, if you choose to not have them in special ed, you just tell the school, I don't want my child in special ed anymore. However, if you want your child to receive special ed services, then it can be forever. My youngest son had special ed services from first grade till he graduated, and he was homeschooled from fourth grade on, but we were in California with a homeschool charter. So we were still in the school system, even though I dictated everything my kids learn. And now he's in college. And when he first started college, we went to the Disability Services Center so that he could have accommodation. But after the first semester, or at least the first year, he said he didn't need the accommodations that they offered. And so he has chosen not to go back to the Student Disability Service Center this year in his second year. So now he's out of special ed, but that is a fear that I know I had as a parent, and I think a lot of parents have that fear.
My sister, who I like to give a hard time to on the podcast, because she's like, "I'm normal." And I'm like, "Could you please define normal for me? Because you're so far from normal." Uh, Lita's giving a look because she knows which one I'm talking about. Um, she is severely dyslexic. I would say she is still considered as illiterate. She designs power subplants, and she's had people come up to her and go, "Oh, my kid's life is over because they were diagnosed as dyslexic." And she's like, "Well, I went to Colorado School. Mine's dyslexic, so maybe it's not the end of the world."
Well, and if people feel like it's the end of the world if their child has a diagnosis of dyslexia, we can help them change that world for them because as long as they're receiving the right type of instruction, they can gain those skills. I mean, even if your sister, if she wanted to learn to read better, I taught my husband at age 44 because he couldn't pass his mortgage exam. And so he needed, because after 2008, they required mortgage exams. And after I tutored him, he was able to pass it. So it's just, we need to teach them differently than the traditional route of learning.
Well, I will admit, we were at the ophthalmologist. It wasn't even the optometrist. It was the ophthalmologist, which tells you we weren't probably there because of the dyslexia. Uh, we thought she had a lazy eye, which she does have a lazy eye on top of everything else. And I'm pretty sure that lazy eye does not help the dyslexia, the dysgraphia, and but that was when they picked it up. And one of her teachers was also like, "So what's a lazy eye? Like, can I just like discipline her when her eye gets lazy?"
Wow.
I'm like, "That's not quite how that works. I wish you could discipline the eye into working properly." It's not your fault. It was just we spent 2 hours at the ophthalmologist. The whole time she was there, she's like, no, it's dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. And then your eye went finally like towards the end because you were getting tired. And she's like, oh, I see it. She's got lazy eye.
Wow. So, what was the ophthalmologist able to help with the lazy eye, or no, that's not their expertise either?
They have been doing a wait and see approach for the last almost decade now over it.
Oh,
Because it's not bad enough to do all the major intervention, but they're like, well, this could just be something that annoys her. But I did want to talk about, you've got an entire program to help people with dyslexia. And you mentioned your son's homeschooled, so this also works for kids who are homeschooled, obviously.
yeah. So that's how my journey started, was when we were leaving Texas. Well, I'll back up just a little. When we moved to Texas, that's when my daughter was identified as being dyslexic, because we have a similar situation. We tried, I had her in public school, and the teacher said in kindergarten, you can do better than this, and wrote that on her paper. Well, she couldn't read that paper. And so I took that as a personal hit. And so we ended up, I pulled her out of school and trying to homeschool her. And this was back in 2002. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I had two babies. And so I would try to homeschool her while my two babies were napping. And that didn't work well. So I put her back in school, and we put her in a different public school. And then they suggested I hold her back. They didn't know what was, wrong. So we listened to the school thinking they knew better, and we held her back. And then we put her in private school the next year. Well, private school was no better because they didn't have anyone trained to help our daughter succeed. And so then after that, we went back to public school. And it wasn't until, and I spent all these years trying to figure out why my kid was struggling. No clue. Teachers didn't know, they would only identify her ADHD, and they'd say, well, it's not that bad. So when we moved to Texas, within a week, my daughter's teacher said, oh, she's dyslexic. But we don't do the testing until the spring. So get her in special ed for her ADHD. So we did that. And then in the spring, they tested her for dyslexia. And so by then she was finishing third grade, should have been finishing fourth grade. She started receiving dyslexia services in fifth grade. And she went from not being able to spell words like cat to being able to spell. And so then my youngest son started school in first grade, and his teacher's like, oh, I think he has some learning challenges. I said, it's probably dyslexia. Will you test him for dyslexia? And so they tested him a year earlier than they usually test the kid. And so the next year in second grade, he started receiving dyslexia services. So we decided to move back to Las Vegas, the second to worst or worst. It toggles back and forth school district in the country. And I wasn't going to put the kids back in public school for sure. And we couldn't afford private school anymore. So I decided to homeschool. And my son's dyslexia teacher said, you need to learn how to help him. And so that is literally how it started, was I wanted to help my son learn how to read. And so I got trained. And then my daughter, who had graduated the program in Texas, I told her she needed to start tutoring with me, because the program I was using was better than what my kids had in school. And so then I was talking to a homeschool mom, and her daughter was in fifth grade and she couldn't read. And I said, well, it sounds like dyslexia. So I started tutoring her. And that's literally how my business started, was I just wanted to help my kids and help other homeschool kids. And for homeschool families, it's pretty cool, because if we tutor your child, you don't need to teach them whatever subject we're helping them. In California, if they're in a charter, we have to provide samples. And so the samples that can be used are from our tutoring. And so if it's the language arts, that covers their language arts. If they're doing the writing program that we use for dysgraphia and dyslexia, they can use that for history because the writing we use is history based. So that can cover their history and their language arts. And then for math, of course, we take care of their math, teaching them all the math. So it's pretty awesome. It's one-on-one. What I found when I was homeschooling my kids was I could teach my kids the subjects that they enjoy. But when it came to the subjects that were hard for them, it was really hard to teach them because they're so comfortable with mom that it's harder to force them to do something they don't want to do. And so I learned with my son after I started tutoring him, and then when I hired tutors, it was better to have someone else tutor him than for me to tutor him. When I was tutoring him and other kids, he was the last student I would work with of the day because I'd get so frustrated tutoring him. I didn't want to put that frustration on my student. So, it definitely is better being mom in the fun area and having, farm it out to someone else for the difficult.
I definitely understand that. At the dance studio, we have an amazing ballet mistress who everyone else loves and adores. And then when it comes to teaching her own grandchild, she's like, we have got to find someone to teach this child because I am going to scream bloody murder at how stressed this child makes me.
So even for a grandchild, it's the same situation. Interesting.
Yeah. It was very interesting because it's like, yeah, no, that's how parents get. But all the other kids, she can be patient, she can be perfect. When it gets to her grandkids, she's like, why aren't you doing exactly what I want you to do? And you're my grandkid. Because you're so easy on them every other time of the day, right?
Well, and when I used to have an in-home preschool, and my daughter, I couldn't have her in my preschool because she was only 2.5 and she would act up. So I traded with my girlfriend, who had kids the same age as mine. So she took my son. No, she took my daughter and I took her daughter. And then I had my son. My older son was always fine with me being his preschool teacher, but my daughter just, it didn't work.
I can definitely understand that. I did want to touch on something because I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole recently with Lita's age group and some dance teachers going, what are you doing with Gen Alpha when they get here? And I'm like, they're already here.
Gen Beta's been born. Insult me, why don't you? Just insult me. Just insult me. Just insult me. It's fun being insulted by other kids my own age because at least I knew it where we're both on the same page and we're just doing it forever. Love and fun.
The millennial in me is enjoying watching Gen Z deal with Gen Alpha. But you started your tutoring business before COVID, correct?
Oh, yes. 2012.
I know with her, even just autism services like speech, OT, and even physical therapy had to go over Zoom during those lovely days of COVID. Did that affect your tutorees at all, having to go from in-person to Zoom?
So we had 2 students of our 20 at the time who could not do the online tutoring. And it wasn't because of their dyslexia, it was because they had severe ADHD. Although we have lots of students with ADHD, I'd say about 75% of our students have ADHD. It's the ones with the over the top ADHD who are unmedicated, who just were not able to, but everyone else transitioned really well. And I actually had some students before COVID who were online students. And one of the students that was my student, he was an in-person student and they used to travel 45 minutes each way for tutoring. And so they decided, well, he didn't want to do the online at first, but I'm like, just give it a try. And so when they started doing online tutoring, he would play with his Rubik's cubes while I tutored him. And that was great for him because it gave him something to keep his hands busy, and he was able to focus on our tutoring session. Now, when we met in person, he didn't need, as he probably played with like Hopper or something like that I had in my office, but he did fantastic either way. So we find a lot of kids do better with the online tutoring because it's one-on-one, and they are distracted by hearing other people in the next room over, or hearing a bunch of tiles fall on the floor, and they're like, "What's that?" So, yeah, so sometimes they do better, and they don't have to have a 45-minute trip to their tutor, so they're fresh and not tired from the drive over.
I can understand that part. I've just been asking people because I've noticed the Gen Alpha kids, they're a lot more comfortable with computer screens now. And I'm like, maybe because they were all on computer screens during their formative years of life.
Well, and I think that's so true because my grandbaby's only 14 months old, and I was babysitting her yesterday, and she pulled my phone out of my back pocket, and then she managed to unlock the screen, and she was zooming in the photos. I'm like, how did she do all that at 14 months old?
Yeah. So you offer online tutoring though also, like if someone's
That's
in a
all we
different
did.
state.
Yeah.
So if someone's in a different state, they can get on the website and go, "Hey, I'd like to look into this."
Yes, absolutely. Since COVID, we don't have an in-person location. I moved out of Orange County where I lived before COVID. Couldn't afford to stay there for sure. And so we've got students as far as Pennsylvania, and we've had students in Hawaii. We can only help American students because our English is different than even Canada, and our math is different than even Canada. So that's our one caveat.
I've had to do papers across the border, and it's not fun when you're trying to check each other's math. And I know I have my PhD in theoretical physics. So obviously, I can't do arithmetic. That is not a joke. I don't know many theoretical physicists who can do arithmetic.
I don't know what theoretical physicists
Yeah.
does.
I not like ask me to create a function or a formula off the top of my head. I can probably do it for you. Ask me to add 2 plus 2, and my phone has a calculator. How far up do you guys tutor mathematics with the dyscalculia?
So my tutor is able to go all the way up to calculus. However, I never recommend that parents have their child who has dyscalculia go beyond whatever the state requirement is for graduation. Because why? Why force them to do that? Most people with dyscalculia are not going to choose careers that they need advanced calculus. I can't really say the word right. My youngest son, he hated math. And if he weren't homeschooled, he probably would not have passed algebra, which is the highest math that's required in California. So, he did what he had to do. And, but then when he got to college, he had to take math, baking math, because he's a culinary major. And so he was able to, work through that. And I told him at first, I said, we can do this. It was an online class. I said, we could do it together. We just did the first session together, and he was able to do the rest of it himself. So, if when they're going to college and they need more advanced math than they receive, by all means, they can come back to us and we can help, or they can find someone who is able to teach them the advanced math necessary. But our biggest focus is on teaching them addition and subtraction, multiplication, fraction, decimals, percentages, how to read the clock. And then algebra is another huge one.
I know so many people that are up at my level that cannot do algebra, read the clock, or do math. Or we literally do. It's not a joke. We consider math anything above algebra, and anything below is arithmetic. And you'll hear so many of us like. She's got a friend whose little brother was like, I can't do math. I'm like, no, you're doing arithmetic. It is totally different. Please do not confuse it with what we do. Aeneas' little brother. His teacher's like, you can't do math. And I'm like, yeah, you should go meet some of the rocket scientists. They can't add. There's a reason we have calculators.
Yeah, they're called rocket scientists for a reason. They can't do anything else. And I'm surprised if any of them can cook. Well, remembering to feed themselves.
They can cook,
Actually,
but
now
I've
that I
seen
think about it, I'm surprised any of our scientists remember to feed themselves and they'll just starve to death by accident while doing their work.
that's more that they forget to do their work. But I've seen some culinary guys who can do some high calculus functions that cannot add 2 plus 2. And it's like, we need to discuss a differentiation between mathematics and arithmetic.
I met none of them remember to do the mathematical thing of feeding themselves.
Yes. I wanted to also go back to dysgraphia because I don't think people completely, the dyscalculia they kind of get. They're like, oh, it just must mean you can't do any form of math. And then they're like, just try harder and use more flashcards, which is not going to help at all. Dysgraphia, I can't find anyone who understands what that means outside of like, the dyslexia community and the dys community. Everyone who's in that community is like, let me explain it. But when I'm even doing IEPs for people and I'll walk in and a teacher's like, well, is dysgraphia that they just can't understand a graph?
Well, they need to learn the Latin prefixes, or Greek. I think it's Latin, because that's, that should be something all teachers know. But yeah, dysgraphia is much less publicly understood. And with my second youngest child, they have severe dysgraphia. Super bright, able to carry on conversations with adults as a child. But once he was asked to write on paper, he broke down. He shut down. So literally, when I was homeschooling him, from 5th grade till he graduated, he would dictate his papers to me, and I would type it all up for him because he struggled with the text to or speak to text, because it would make mistakes. And especially this was, 10, 12 years ago. Shoot, more than that maybe. But anyway, it still has issues where it doesn't necessarily understand what you're trying to say. And then he would get overwhelmed with, I don't know what it typed and I don't know what I was trying to say. So it's just much better for me to type it for him. That's the most severe version of dysgraphia, where you just can't put your thoughts on paper. And so we work with kids who, where we teach them how to take notes. So to find the key words on what they want to write about, if they're copying text, or if they're writing a summary, or, doing a research paper, you pick the most important word and just keep those words. They write them down, and then they use those words to help trigger what they want to write about. So that's the first step. All of our language arts instruction is systematic instruction. So it starts from the smallest point. So for the writing, it's the note taking. For the reading and spelling, it's teaching them the sound, because a lot of dyslexic people struggle to hear sound or to be able to separate the smallest sound. So for the writing, after that, then we start to teach them how to write quality sentences. And each week, we're going to add another component to what they're writing so that in the end, they have a beautifully written paper. We had one student, she started writing like 3 and 5 page papers. All she was supposed to do was write 1.5 pages. But she became so confident and comfortable with it that she just ran with it. And her mother was a math teacher. So when she came to us, she's like, I could teach math all day long, but I don't know how to teach my daughter how to write. So with the more common dysgraphia that people understand is the sloppy handwriting. And as far as I'm concerned, these days, that's not as important if the school is willing to let the child type. And they say that there's like a key component when you're writing to the connection of the brain. But I type most of the time now, and I have just fine ability to remember what I've written when I handwrite as if I type. So I really don't think that's accurate. I think they didn't have the research when they gave that statement. But if parents really want their child to, work on their handwriting, copy work is not good for kids with dyslexia or dysgraphia. It's better to dictate to your child and have them maybe have a chart with the letters in front of them so that they can see what letters should look like and just practice through dictation.
And that we had one of her speech and language pathology therapist, and I had a discussion on that one because she's like, no, take that away. And I'm like, she's got dysgraphia, put that back. And she's like, well, she draws, so she can't have dysgraphia.
Well, it's funny how people make these correlations. My daughter actually did not draw. That was one of the things that I noticed when she was really young. She didn't draw, but she doesn't have dysgraphia. She has great handwriting, but that was just her brain wasn't able to, gain the ability to draw. She didn't start drawing stick figures until she was like 11, I think. And, most kids are drawing stick figures when they're 4 or 5. And she's my child who was a singer, and she couldn't learn music notes. They told her in high school, she went to a performing arts high school, that she needed to learn the notes in order to be able to be in the choir. And she didn't because of her dyslexia. She could hear what other people couldn't hear. And the thing is, it's like a blind person. They can hear and smell things better because their eyes aren't working. The same thing with someone with one of these dys's, right? They may struggle in one area, but they're stronger in another area. So it compensates for their weakness.
And the music thing with your daughter, the dog has decided to start barking. That's what she's getting annoyed at over there. I'm wondering if his father has gotten home. Elvis Presley never could read music. He had to have it sent in on a demo tape, and then 5 minutes later, he would be able to record it.
Yeah, I mean, he probably had one of the dys's. I don't know that he is one who is known to have that, but a lot of people don't talk about their challenges.
It would be, he was 40s and 50s, so I'm not sure that they were doing a great job of saying, oh, you have this.
They're still not doing a great job of saying it. What are you talking about?
That is true. See, but if you go to the ophthalmologist, it turns out they're really great at telling you stuff. It's just most adults don't go to the ophthalmologist. They're sitting with the obstetrician and not going to the even bigger specialist.
Well, and I don't know if all ophthalmologists would know either, because my son went to one for his vision processing, and I was educating her on dyslexia while I was there, because I wanted to be in the sessions to early ones. Later on, when he was doing practice, I didn't care, but um, I shouldn't say it like that. But I wanted to see, because I was in the industry, and I didn't realize, how many. My son reversed half of the alphabet and half of the numbers when he started vision therapy, and when he finished, he doesn't reverse any letters or numbers anymore. So that was something that vision therapy helped.
I had to give her ophthalmologist a hard time because she managed to, and I don't think you completely remember it because you were so young. Lita was nonverbal when she diagnosed her as dyslexic, dysgraphic, and dyscalculia. And I'm like, you caught that, but you couldn't catch the lazy eye till the very end.
How did they catch all of those things when she was nonverbal?
She was absolutely amazing. And she's like, well, I can get her. She wasn't giving me the numbers the way she should have at this age. And I'm like, are you sure that's because she's not because she's nonverbal? And then we redid the test 2 years later, and when she got the her words, and her ophthalmologist was like, who was right? I'm like, you were right.
That's so interesting.
I will admit you were right. I was wrong. I'll walk away next. But she was just like, yep, I caught it. And she's like, you don't have to be verbal for me to catch it. And I'm like, have you thought about like selling this as like a voodoo magic thing?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of people probably would just ignore it, because look at how uneducated so many teachers are. I offer free webinars quarterly, and they would be so helpful for teachers, but do they come? No, they don't. If they're not, if it's not a requirement for them to fulfill their, annual training thing, they don't do it, unfortunately.
Yeah. I told you we would only keep you an hour. We're coming up on that hour mark. I feel like we're going to have you back on again, Jess, if you've got time in a few months.
Oh, sure, I'd love to.
Um, where can people find you online?
So 3dlearningexperts.com is our website. Everything except for Facebook, you can find us at 3D Learning Experts. Facebook, we had to drop the S.
Understandable. We're going to put all of that on our website, and in the description we keep a running tab of all of our former guests on our website. So if you're listening to this later on and you're like, I want to go hear about Jess, it is on the website somewhere. I need to get better because we've had so many guests. I need to do like a carousel of all the guests. We would love to even have you come back on and talk about homeschooling at some point in time with special needs, because I know that's one question I get asked a lot is, how are you homeschooling with a special needs kid?
I would love to. And just before we do come back, I would love to share that I do have a 9-module training for parents called Confidence to Homeschool. And you can find that on our website. And the idea is to help parents feel confident that they can homeschool their children, because no one is going to put as much effort into helping your child succeed as you. That's just, the way it is. Teachers have 29 other students, maybe even more, and your child is just one of the kids that they need to try to get through the school year, versus you want the best for your child, and that makes you the best candidate. And don't listen to teachers telling you you aren't qualified, because when you became a parent, you became qualified.
I'm pretty sure some of my teachers were really glad when my parents left the school system because I was not the model student.
Yeah.
I was the one arguing with them on facts, and I had gone to this was pre-Google, to Encyclopedia Britannica and was dropping it on their desk going, but that's a fact. So the 9 unit course, what does it cover for the parents who are interested?
It covers like, I couldn't tell you offhand. I don't remember everything, but it covers everything that a parent really needs to give them the confidence. I've even interviewed 10 homeschool parents to give different perspectives of what homeschooling can look like. And I talk about the 13 different types of homeschooling available, different state laws. I don't go real in depth on the different state laws, but just, give you a direction to start finding out what your state requirements are, because that is really important, especially if you're on the East Coast, because the East Coast states are much stricter about homeschooling than the West Coast states are. I've been fortunate. I homeschooled in Nevada, Texas, and California, and all 3 states were great for homeschool families. What else? Well, it talks about special needs. There's one module about homeschooling your special needs child. There's one module about homeschooling your only child. There's what to expect at different ages, and how to like chores and how to get your kids to help around the house. Because when your kids are home all the time, the house needs a lot more tending to, if you care about that. I was someone who cared about that. My daughter is going to homeschool her daughter, and that probably won't be as important to my daughter as it was to me. But, either way, you want them to contribute with the household responsibility, that they're in the house with you 24/7.
And there's a lot of things you can change into schooling if you're homeschooling.
Yes, and that's something I talk about too. And of course, socialization, that is addressed as well, because that's always the biggest concern that pre-homeschooling families have, which is really not as important, not as much of an issue as people think it is.
I have had so many people when we're guesting on their podcast go, so how is Lita being socialized? I'm like, it's less how she's being socialized and how are we getting a chance to recharge her batteries? Because she is definitely introverted and she needs to run away every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, and when you think about traditional school, the kids aren't being socialized. They're being taught how to perform in an industrial job, which most people don't have anymore, or in prison. They teach them how to walk in a straight line and be quiet and only talk when they're out during recess or lunch. That's not really socialization, but that is what society has taught us is proper, rather than our children being able to communicate with adults, which that's what most homeschooled kids know how to do very well, as you are very aware.
Yeah. And I will plug them real quick just because I grew up with them and everything. Homeschool Legal Defense Association has all those laws online. Not that I'm not getting anything from them, but you can get those laws at a click of a button. Just do not freak out because they're a little conservative on what they consider too many laws.
Well, and lawyers are always overcautious because that's what they're in the business of doing. My son-in-law is a lawyer, and when I talk to him about things, he's like, "Oh, you shouldn't do that because you can get into trouble for this, 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 and this." So, that's that. Their job is to protect that.
That's their job. Because, like, if you look at California, they're like, it's almost impossible to homeschool in California.
Really?
Their deal of being able to homeschool freely is no laws that make it difficult, like that you don't have to go talk to the state and how many times they have to go tell the state, hey, these are the laws. You need to follow the laws.
Because in California, you have to register as a private school. I mean, that's technically what homeschool families are, is they are their own private school. And you do a private school affidavit. So, I mean, I guess technically it's not called homeschooling in California.
It's close enough. They count it as homeschooling for homeschool legal defense. But like in New Mexico, you don't even have to register for homeschooling after the first year. You just have to go, we're homeschooling, bye, and you never have to fill out anything again.
That's Nevada too. And Texas, I don't know if you ever have to fill anything out. I had to exit my children out of school. And I had to say I was taking them to private school basically, because that was the only option they had, 15 years ago when I did that. But Nevada, you just registered once, you get a piece of paper. So if a truant officer ever came to your house, you could show it to them. So when we moved from Nevada to California, I was like, well, what if a truant officer comes to my house? I have nothing to show them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know Colorado has some interesting laws. So technically we're under an umbrella school that's out of California, actually.
Oh, interesting.
But they're like, you can do whatever you want. Just, give us what report to us once a year with what you're doing, and we'll keep all your stuff for you.
So you're registered with one of the, what are they called? Something.
You realize this is probably going to good chunk of we're at an hour.
She keeps track of the hour like there's no tomorrow.
Somebody has
She can
to.
keep track of the time now. Still has a problem necessarily reading the clock, but all of our clocks are in military time because both her father and I work off
Okay, in
government
my
time.
defense, Dad taught me how to read the digital clock, not really a clock, and normal human being time clock.
I asked
By
a
that I mean not military clock, because military clock is normal human being time clock, and normal people clocks are just. Why does it go on a loop? Why does it go on a loop? That's wrong. The military loop makes more sense than a normal human being not in the military loop clock.
That's why they made it, because it needed to be easier to understand whether someone needed to report at night or in the morning, right?
Yeah, it does make life easier for government work if it's all on 24 hours. So she learned how to read that and not a normal 12-hour clock.
Well, and I ask parents after we do the evaluation, if their child doesn't know how to read the rotary clock, do you want your child to learn that? Because these days, I mean, it's not that necessary. But a lot of parents are like, yes, I want my child to know it. Other parents are like, no, don't waste my time and my money teaching them that.
It's a requirement-ish in the state of Colorado, and I know New Mexico, because we also homeschooled down there, they were supposed to be able to read the clock hands when they got done with kindergarten, but it was 16 pages of things that they were supposed to know when they got done with kindergarten, and I'm like, none of this is being taught.
Okay,
No,
like
really.
seriously, we're like at 59. If you don't want this going an hour, you should probably end now.
She is really good at keeping me on time because my ADHD, I will keep talking forever.
Person, I've been interacting
you
with human beings too much.
Thank you so much for coming on, Jess. We really enjoyed having you, and I think our audience is going to learn a lot about the different disses, as I have affectionately nicknamed them. We will make sure we have all the information, and we'd love to have you on again sometime if you're okay with it.
Yeah, I would love to come back. And thank you for having me today.
Thanks. Can you say bye, Lita?
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Lita. Bye, Amanda.
Button.
Hello, thank you for watching the podcast. Please subscribe and also look at our adorable paper. Just to watch and subscribe for it, and also please the next And don't forget, if you subscribe if you want this instant of our new podcast, and also be adorable pages. Don't you like it?